Hey y'all, the Breven team is back for what I can't believe is already episode 6. So my sidekick or my brother Steven is with me. My name is Bryan, and we'd like to talk to y'all about questions to ask a builder this week. But before we jump into that, we just got over a nice long 4-day weekend for July 4th, and Steven had a little bit of fun down by the beach. So where'd you go?
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. And yeah, we had a really nice getaway. We went to the Texas coast. We were down in Port Aransas area, a little community development down there called Cinnamon Shore. So anybody who's from Texas may be familiar, but yeah, really, really nice getaway. A couple days on the beach and just a nice relaxation. So yeah, my wife Sydney enjoyed time on the beach, and that's not quite my thing. So I actually spent some time walking houses in Cinnamon Shore that were under construction, which was my way of enjoying vacation and having fun. So, anyways, yeah, it was a good getaway. What about you guys? You guys do some fireworks?
A little bit of fireworks and hung low, and yeah, it was nice to relax. So nothing special.
Awesome. And now we're back with questions that you can ask to spark conversation and also really judge those builders that you've either got on your short list now or have maybe even narrowed it down to just one particular builder. So yeah, I think with that, we've got 10 questions. Maybe we'll have some more that kind of spin off from this. But Bryan, you want to hit us with question number one?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, this is absolutely not a all-inclusive list of questions you should ask your builder. This is just a simple guide of some higher level questions that you certainly don't want to miss, or have a good understanding of how the builders that you're looking at or believe you're going to move forward with handle these topics and important points of the building process. So with no further ado, we've got a lot here, but to keep it compressed, let's jump right in and really just get through these. The first question, again, in no particular order of importance: do you do a cost plus or fixed price contracts? And if they respond with, well, we do cost plus, an appropriate follow-up question might be, how can you assure me that your initial estimates are reasonably accurate? If you get a response that says we do fixed price contracts, how can you assure me that the quality will be sufficient? So we talk a lot about cost plus versus fixed price, and I believe either in next week's episode or very soon, we want to break down a whole, take the time for a whole episode to go through the pros and cons of these different contract types. But I think that with the cons, you just want to understand, hey, this is a risk or a potential risk, and understand how the builder handles that. So, Stephen, what else would you add to that?
No, I think that's great. And, it really kind of diverges into two different paths, right? It's a fork in the road, if you will. And when they answer either one of those two ways, either a cost plus contract or a fixed price contract, I think those are great follow-up questions, right? For each way that they're going to go. And with the cost plus contract, just touching on that real quick, they'll give you a price, but it's not set. And that's exactly what a cost plus contract is. So how can that builder assure you that their initial estimate or the number that they're giving you to sign a contract is going to be accurate 6-12 months down the line, right? When you're coming to the finish line of that build. On the flip side, with a fixed price contract, you've set that price up front with the builder. You've agreed to it. You guys have all signed. You know what you're in for the most part, minus selections and allowances and other things that are relatively minor. But how can you be assured with the builder that they're not going to cut corners or skimp on certain things because they've locked you in at a certain price, right? If they can go save money on lumber, well, you know what? Lumber is kind of lumber, right? It's mostly all made the same, exactly, right? So it comes from trees, but how can you be assured that their trim carpenter isn't going to go with somebody cheaper or skimp out on something? So just two things to be aware of there. Jumping into the next question though. So question number 2 that you could ask your builder: how do you calculate the pricing you're proposing to me? So this is kind of a spin-off of that first question, but what you really want to understand is, how is that builder deriving or coming to that number that they're presenting to you, whether it's a cost plus contract or a fixed price contract, right? Maybe a concerning answer might be, well, you know what, we built a home 2 years ago in this same neighborhood and it was a little bit smaller, but that was the price per square foot. So we just multiplied it by your square footage, right? Probably not a good answer that you're looking for. If they can tell you, hey, we went out and shopped all of our trades and all of our suppliers and everything else, got all this pricing back and put it together in a booklet for you or a cost estimate spreadsheet or something, that's a much more reassuring answer, right? So anything to add on that, Bryan?
In a cost plus agreement, even in a fixed price proposal, it's absolutely your right and okay for you to ask some fairly pressing questions on some of the specific costs, right? And so these are higher level, but for example, if you have something unique in your build that isn't, I mean, every custom home is custom for a lot of reasons, but let's say, for example, you have a very unique ceiling detail that you want done during frame stage, which is going to add some complexity. Of course, that comes with cost, as well as maybe some extra complexity with drywall later on. That would be something that you would just want to maybe point out and say, hey, how are you determining the cost? Is this included or is this just a guess, right? And it's okay to get a little granular and not intentionally try and, for lack of a better analogy, back the corner or back the builder into a corner or something. It's just these are all questions that you just want to understand how the builder responds.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, definitely. And on all these questions, these are meant to spark conversation and be talking points. And you kind of, as a listener, judging the builder that you're interviewing, right? And getting a better feel for how they handle questions, how they're addressing this build, and the professionalism and the communication that they're presenting as they're answering these questions. So, yeah, you want to take us to the next question?
Number 3, how are you going to keep us updated on progress during construction? Big piece. And the answers can go a lot of different ways, but you're looking for that communication style. What structure do they have to their construction walks throughout the phases of the build, as well as just what's going on, what's happening, right? You have a right to know, and how are you going to communicate with me, right? And whether you live right down the road or you live across the country from where right now, relative to where your new home is being built, you just want to understand what the communication protocols are going to be, so you can set your expectations appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that definitely wraps that up and is a good summary on that one. Well, and one more point on that is that, some builders will use construction management software, which is a handy tool for people to keep track of their build. The builder is ideally updating that frequently, whether it's a couple times a week or whatever their intervals are, but it allows them to put pictures and give a schedule and a budget breakdown and all kinds of stuff for whatever they open it up to the clients. But that's a handy way for people to manage how they're communicating with clients as well. So number 4, do you engineer floor plans? And I think this is kind of it can be a loaded question because there's a lot of different ways that builders can take this and a lot of different ways they can engineer. But really what you want to know is, is this a fly-by-night builder that doesn't engineer their plans and they don't have anybody that's a professional stamping off on the design of the structure? That can be a bit concerning, right? And different jurisdictions require different things, right? So some neighborhoods, some cities will require fully engineered and fully stamped plans. Other jurisdictions don't require anything. If you're building out in the country and there's no jurisdiction or governing body, they may not require anything, right? So it's up to the builder's goodwill and the way that they conduct their business to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And that's engineering all of your plans from the foundation to the structural, which is the framing and all the wind loads and everything else. And then all the way to HVAC, energy. There's a lot of different things that go into it before the build even starts. Anything there, Bryan?
It's thinking about what potential risk or liability there is in the future, right? And this ties in closely to post warranty, or I'm sorry, post closing warranties, and what builders provide around a structural warranty if they do provide one. And we highly suggest that you work with a builder that does, just to protect yourself, but not to scare you. And there's plenty of good, nice, quality custom homes that are built today in areas where there is no governing body, where engineering is not required, that they withstand the test of time, and they will withstand decade after decade the elements and the sun and the wind and all that, and there's no issues. But there is risk and liability that you move in and a year later you've got a big crack through your foundation, or God forbid you have a framing, a structural defect, and a wall is bent or bowing or caved in, and at that point, what do you do, right? Who's liable? What's the best course of action? Nobody wants to find themselves in that position, but this is where it all starts, right? Is there a professional engineer that is signed off on saying this house is built properly to handle the proper elements and loads and wind shears and all that?
Yep. Yeah, good additions there. All right. Yeah, question number 5 that we've got here. How can I accurately see and determine the quality of the homes that you build? Right. So that's a great question to ask your builder. And this is one of the big 3 pillars that we always talk about, which is that quality piece, right? You want to make sure that whatever builder you're choosing is matching the quality that you expect, right? And now different qualities fall all over the place, of course, with different budgets. So if you have a $400,000, $500,000 budget, you might not be expecting $10 million plus budget, or quality, right? So trying to keep those in relation or in proportion there. But you do want to have some way to see their quality, whether that's a model home that they have either in that neighborhood or community, or a different community that's somewhat close by, or even a home that they've built previously that they still are close with the homeowner, and can get you in there to see it, or a home that's under construction and almost complete. There's a lot of different ways builders can show you something in person. But then also nowadays there's a lot of cool, online and electronic tools that they can use to show you the quality of their build. Now, of course, it's not the same as standing inside a house, touching, feeling, seeing things. But with 3D walkthroughs now, and with augmented reality and a bunch of other cool tools, they can get all the way to the point where, like we do with some of our clients, we can put a VR headset on our clients, let them walk through any home that we've built in the past. So kind of a cool little differentiator there. It's much quicker, of course, than driving around an entire city to go see different floor plans or different models. And just something that we do, and we've seen success with it. But every builder is going to have their way of showing their own quality. So,
and to add to that, I think if you can see a house that is under construction, certainly ideally through the frame stage and through mechanicals, meaning electrical, plumbing, HVAC has been installed, anywhere in that area of progress, you can have the builder walk you through one of those homes. Yes, it's not complete. Yes, anything under construction can be messy, but you can learn a lot about what's going on in terms of quality behind the walls that does absolutely affect the performance of your finished home, that you just don't see when it is complete because it's behind the walls. So you don't need to be a building science expert. You're not expected to go through and understand everything, but have that builder walk you through some things that they do that might be unique, or things that they really focus on that is important to them, that adds to the quality of their homes.
Yep. Yeah, good addition there.
Number 6, how do you handle exterior and interior selections? Allowances go along with that, and how do you determine allowance amounts, right? When we say, hey, you have, for example, so much for flooring, how do you come up with those numbers, right? Because this is important regardless of whether you have a cost plus or fixed price contract, right? And so there's a lot to unpack here, but I think the long and short of it is you're trying to uncover just how do they manage selections? Selections is a big task, regardless of the size of the home. I mean, we find in our homes, there's 200 to 300 decisions that have to be made in terms of what paint color do you want on this wall versus this ceiling versus that wall versus what doorknobs. I mean, and it goes on and on and on. So really, you're just looking for how are we going to stay organized in this, and how do I do this in a timely and efficient manner so that I'm not spending hundreds of hours putting this together, and who's gonna guide me through the selection journey, whether it be interior or exterior selections. They're very similar, but slightly different because the stone and things like that, come from quarries versus going into a showroom and picking out plumbing or electrical fixtures. And along those same lines with allowances, just tying back into the budget, you don't want to get into a contract where you're building a 5,000 square foot house and there's an allowance that is, say, $10,000 for flooring materials for the entire house, and the builder thought that that's acceptable when that wouldn't even be possible. And then they come back to you later on in the build and say, well, actually, I need another $20,000 to $30,000 to get the rest of the flooring materials after you've made your selections, when even the cheapest selections wouldn't match the original allowance of, say, for example, $10,000. So those are things that you just want to ask and understand how they've come up with the initial allowance amount. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I think you did a really good job of covering that. And I want to just touch on the point that you were saying about allowances. You know that this is more just to spark the conversation and hear the background detail of how they arrived at those allowance numbers. And it's a tough game from a builder plus from the client. How do we accurately convey the quality and the exact selections that we're going to make, but be able to put a price to that? And nobody knows that up front. So it's kind of a little bit of a cat and mouse game, but ultimately, the builder has to get close and give you an estimate there that's going to be reasonable for the quality that you're expecting, right? Are you expecting a level 1 finish out, which would be, on the lower end? Or are you expecting a level 5 or level 10 finish out, right? Which is on the higher end. Just to make sure that alignment is there and those allowances are close to what you're looking for. But a lot of room for error there. And that's definitely a good question to ask a builder. So moving on to number 7, how do you determine an accurate building timeline for my particular build? I think this is a great question. This covers that other pillar, or a second out of the 3 pillars of building timeline, time frame, all that stuff. Everybody wants to know, they're excited to start. They want to know, when can I move in, right? When's the home going to be done? And this is something that, you want the builder to be able to talk through on how they arrived at, hey, I think this is going to take 10 months, or I think this is going to take 18 months, right? Those are 2 completely different numbers. And every builder is going to be a little bit different, right? So just good to know how they're arriving at that time frame and kind of what their reasoning is for it, right? Do they expect delays? Are they counting for weather and bad, other unforeseen circumstances that are going to arise mostly, or even unexpected things that you don't know that are going to arise? Have they accounted for any of that, or are they just strictly going off of the schedule running perfectly? So a lot of room for variance there. But what are your thoughts, Bryan?
I think you said it well. I'll just move on to number 8. I think the point there is just to get an understanding of that timeline. They owe you that. It's part of the expectations you should have of just, how long is this going to take, and understanding why it might take this long, and understand that it probably will fluctuate, right? Any custom home build is a major project. So number 8 is more of it might feel like more of a interview question, but I think it's worth asking, or we think it's worth asking at the right time, once some other discussions have been had, after you have a plan set and land, and after you've shared a little bit more about your vision and expectations around the timelines, budgets, quality, those 3 pillars that we often talk about. What do you see as the biggest challenge to completing this build to my expectations, right? And challenge the builder to see what's their thought process. How do they respond to that, right? And they're probably not going to expect that question, but it shows that you're thinking through a lot of this build, and what do they see as the challenge? Because every single home we have ever built, there has been something that has been more challenging than we thought it would be. Maybe it's not the same challenge that we thought it might be going into the build before we ever start construction, but it's just good to see how the builder responds to that question. And then obviously they're probably going to say, well, I see this as the biggest challenge of doing this particular detail on the staircase, but here's how we're gonna mitigate that risk, or here's how we're gonna address it. We have a really good trim carpenter that does this type of work, and we've already started talking to him and addressing how we can do this to make sure that it meets your expectations of this exact look and style you're going for on this staircase, for example, right? But addressing that hey, we see this as a challenge, but here's how we're going to try and overcome it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a very good question, like you said, as far as an interview type question, because it says you're interviewing a builder to build your dream home, and you want to make sure that you're picking the right one. And to hear their answer is going to help you fill some gaps and also understand their thought process. So definitely a good one there. Number 9, do you have any client testimonials, reviews, or references that I could sync up with? I think that's a good one just in this day and age, right? There's so many different ways that we can evaluate a business or a building company or whatever it is. And a lot of these builders will be the first one to say it don't have an online presence, and that's not a good thing or a bad thing. But you want to be pretty cautious going into it if there's no public data on that company, right? So checking online, of course, see if they have a Google profile. Is the Google profile, does it have any reviews that you could see? Those are most of the time pretty good. Testimonials, client testimonials, a lot of times builders will put these on their website. But you also have to take those a little bit with a grain of salt, because of course those clients were the ones that gave a favorable testimonial, right? So still, I mean, it's usually legitimate, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. And then references, once again, a builder could give you any references that they choose, right? But it still helps to have those conversations with people that have been through the process before with that particular builder. And a lot of times people will tell the truth, right? Whether they were a good reference, they'll still tell you, and you can ask them pretty targeted questions about, what was one struggle you had with this builder, right? And a lot of times they'll think about it and they'll probably give you a pretty legitimate answer. So, good to walk through that and use those resources to your advantage as you're evaluating a builder. But of course, just checking, word of mouth and people in the area, maybe even calling the city if they're in a local jurisdiction. The city could have some data on the builder, they're in good standing, or no, they've been falling behind on a lot of builds and we've had issues with them. The city can provide some insight there as well. So, I think it's a good opportunity to open the door on a lot of things, and the internet is good and bad for that, right? Everything's out there. So, a good chance to do some research on the builder that you believe you're going to move forward with.
Yep. I love the references piece. I think to your point that people can portray a certain look and feel because of positive reviews. Nobody leaves negative reviews up if they have any control over it, right? And I know Google, you can't just choose the ones you want or not, but you do, as you said, have to take some of those with a grain of salt of, hey, was this reviewed? Did they pay somebody to write this and they're not even a true client? I mean, reviews, who knows where they came from, but I love the references piece, being able to just talk to another former customer or homeowner. What better way to just get a good understanding from a third party or a former homeowner of, hey, how did it go, right? And I think you're going to find, even with the top custom home builders that have a really strong reputation in the market, that, hey, that there's still challenges, right? There's still things that, oh well, there were some hiccups here, but we got through it, and all in all, we're very pleased, right? I mean, these are major projects that come with unexpected challenges. As much as we do our best, all of us home builders do to mitigate those. There's things that come up, right? So I think it's very, very fair and a great question to ask. What challenges did you have? But just because there were some negative things that may be mentioned when talking to a reference or a previous homeowner, understand what that is, and understand that there's probably going to be some of that with your build, no matter what builder you go with, right? So not trying to position ourselves for that, but it's just the nature of the business.
Yeah, good point there. Awesome. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah. Last but not least, and another important question here: what support should I expect after closing or getting the keys? Basically saying, "Hey, this house is yours, and it's a done deal." Well, it is, but it isn't, right? I mean, there's absolutely things. You've just moved into your dream home. You're excited, and once you start turning the knobs and basically taking it for a test drive, if I can use my poor analogies, stay on that train, you take it for a test drive, and you're going to find things that just, hey, this isn't what I expected, or there's going to be little things that need to be touched up on and need to be addressed. Hey, the water pressure is low in this faucet, right? Okay, well, if it's low and it's supposed to be higher, then yeah, that needs to be corrected, right? So you're really looking for, what's the process? How do I communicate with you post closing? What does the warranty look like? What is considered warrantable? What is considered not warrantable? Get all of that up front, because you can quickly fall into a large gray area here. And us builders, we try and do our best to keep it black and white, but we also want you to be extremely happy. And us at Breven Homes, I mean, the customer experience, the homeowner experience throughout the entire journey is so important to us that we don't want to have to tell you no ever, right? So we do our absolute best, and sometimes we have to, just because we don't have any other choice. But we do take that seriously and try and keep everything as black and white as possible. So, Stephen, the more I'm talking through this question, I realize there's a whole lot to unpack here as well.
Oh yeah. I think it's worthy of another podcast episode, just covering warranty and what's to be expected there from a builder. But I think you hit on some good points, and I also want to add on the fact that, those references that we just mentioned in question number 9, that is a great opportunity to ask, how has this builder handled warranty things that have come up for you now that you've completed your build and you've moved in and you've used the home? Have there been a lot of warranty items? Were they preventable during the build, or were they things that just, maybe were unexpected or came up after the build, just natural causes, whatever? And once those warranty items were submitted, what was the process? How long did it take for that builder to jump into action and get those things corrected that should be and are rightfully warranty items? So anyways, just good things to ask and be aware of from the builder's perspective and from, homeowner's perspective, so that you know what you're getting into after the build, because that is a big portion of it, right? The build can take, give or take a year or more. Warranty is, for most builders, a year at least, so covering the warranty and the build that they just finished for you for another year, it's a long relationship, and you want to make sure you're picking the right builder. So hopefully these questions have helped at least spark conversation and get the conversation going with the builder or the few builders that you've shortlisted. So I think there's a lot more questions. I'm sure we're missing some, and there's a lot more we could add. But this is going to be fun. As we continue this podcast, we're going to get plenty of other questions from listeners and all kinds of stuff. And even in our day-to-day, as we're selling homes and, working in our own business, we get questions all the time. So we're going to keep a running list of that. Maybe we follow up and do another questions to ask your builder, questions asked throughout the build process, or whatever, right? And just have another episode down the line that covers more questions. So these were the 10 that we came up with, and hopefully they help as people are getting into this process. So what do you think, Bryan? Wrap this up?
No, this has been a fun one. These are all really important questions, and it's up to you as the homeowner to to understand how you like or dislike the responses, and how you elaborate. And as we've said earlier, this should hopefully spark a conversation to just give you hopefully the warm and fuzzies that, hey, this is the right builder. And let's go back to that word that we used in the last podcast, or the last episode, that we actually haven't used at all today. I just have trust in this builder that they're going to give me everything I want under that timeline, that budget, and that quality. So that I expect. And I think with asking these questions amongst a bunch of others that you come up with, you're gonna, by the end of this, you should have a really good feel for what builder do I trust the most that's going to get this done, and you can feel confident in the decision that you make. So great stuff.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Once again, thank you for the listeners on this week 6 and episode 6 of the podcast. We're having a great time with it, and we appreciate all the support that you guys, the listeners, are providing us. So, please feel free to, send us questions and drop those below the show notes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just want to thank you guys overall, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks. Until next time.